So I think that, the ownership piece, and I think everybody in a room can take ownership of the same problem, but it's important to take that ownership, think through it, as far as you can, as far as the best way to go about it. And that's everybody's responsibility. And then it's everybody's responsibility also to make sure that that they voice that concern. That's how good ideas develop, and how, if you want to have a lot of different input or different perspectives on a problem, if you don't speak your mind, you're also not going to get any benefit out of having a diverse room.
I'm Mark Cook, president of Windfall Partners. We get leaders unstuck and thriving with their teams. After turnarounds as chief executive, the largest ever studies of award-winning leaders, a New York Times bestseller, and 5-star keynotes. I've coached 4,000 client wins at top brands. My Bold Encounters is an advanced system for leading. First, powerful steps on a path forward. Second, problem-solving skills that beat obstacles fast. Now, lead with Bold Encounters today.
Welcome to Bold Encounters. I'm Mark Cook, and I have with me a dear friend, Calvin Wooley. I've known him a long time. How are you, Calvin?
Good to be here. Thank you for having me.
You bet. I'm going to tell a little bit about you. Calvin is a VP of IT, or in IT, and he works on the data side of things, and he's one of the people responsible for leading the team that captures all the client data about revenue. Very important topic. Clients, revenue.
Yes.
So I'm really excited. I've known you a long time, but I ran back into you a decade later, I think, and you've had a very different set of experiences since I knew you when we were young, and it became very fascinating. We'll get into that, but I'd love you to tell me about you've had a big memoir specific moment in your life early in college that changed everything. And I think getting stuck is an understatement, which is part of what I try to help people do, get unstuck. So tell us a little bit about who you are for a second, and then go back in time and tell us about your college experience and tell us your story through leading as a vice president.
Okay, great. So yeah, I grew up here in Salt Lake City, Utah. Very active childhood. Loved to spend time in the mountains. Loved to go skiing in particular, snowboarding, telemark skiing, whatever kind of sliding down the mountain I could do, I loved. I wasn't too involved in team sports like football. I was much more drawn towards, like I said, skiing, and then water skiing and tennis and those sorts of activities. And, Utah's a great place for that. Like, I grew up, I feel like I had a complete free range youth, mountains around me, chase rattlesnakes, go ride dirt bikes in the mountains. I look back at it and I wonder how I was able to live in such an ideal time in an ideal place around ideal, people that had a huge positive influence on me. So that was kind of how my life went. And then I went to the University of Utah for a year, and then I went away for a couple of years. And when I came back, I decided to enroll at BYU, which I did primarily because at that point, the University of Utah was much more of a commuter campus. It was people that would, live in the valley, come up, go to school, and then leave. And I was looking for an on-campus experience. And so I went down to BYU, and when I got down there, I met a great group of roommates and friends that were from all over the country, New York to California. And I learned a lot from them. I learned really how to have fun without causing too much problems or too many problems. It was a great, they taught me a lot about living a good life and having a very good time doing it. A lot of trips to Lake Powell in my roommate's father's boat that he would share generously. He felt like if a family played together, then they stayed together. And then to do that, they invited all their friends along with them. So it was really an amazing experience going down there. I majored in statistics. And then right before I got to my senior year, it was It was Memorial Day weekend of 1996, and I was on a double date, and I was in a serious automobile accident. Through the course of the accident, the guy that was driving, he had overcorrected, and the car had rolled over. The back door had popped open of a Cherokee, and I flew out the back along with my date. My date stayed on top of the overpass, but I went off of the overpass and landed on the shoulder of the freeway below, which was about a 30-foot fall. Life Flight or Air Med came and picked me up and took me to the University Hospital. I don't have any memories of those first 3.5 days, but I got great life-saving care and kept me alive. But the first memory I do have after I came to consciousness was my mom's telling me that what had happened. You serious accident, you've received a spinal cord injury, but then she said something that has held true ever since then, and was very profound. She said, "But the family is there for you all of the way." So I spent 3 months in the hospital. 3 months of that summer in the hospital. Had a couple friends that were over at the base camp of Mount Everest that came home to see me in the hospital. That was pretty touching that they would they'd make the effort to get all the way there, but then just drop everything and come back immediately. We watched the, final season of Seinfeld up there, and it was a place for movies all summer long. It was 3 months that I felt a lot of support from family and friends, and my dogs. I had a dog that would come up and walk through the hospital and wait for the stair doors to open, come down, find me. If I wasn't there, then he'd go back and wait in my room. So very loyal dogs through that whole period of time as well. But after about 3 months, they transition you out of rehab and put you, and then you go home and start to figure out life and digest life with the new reality of having a spinal cord injury. So after that 3 months, we, worked on getting the home wheelchair accessible and making those kind of changes, figuring out nurse appointments. For CNA help and that kind of thing, and just start to learn the new reality. And, right from the very beginning, it was clear what my mom said was true, that the family was there for me all of the way. So all those modifications happen. I go through, I finish, it took me 3 years to finish my last year of college because the math classes that I had were pretty advanced, meaning that I had to learn some of these equations and relationships in my mind and memorize them. And my mom could be my scribe, but she's not a mathematician, so it was a challenge, but it made my mind expand a little bit into knowing that I could memorize some of these equations and learn them, even if I couldn't write and use my hands. So anyway, after 3 years, I graduated from college with my degree in statistics. And about that same time, I heard that Goldman Sachs was going to be moving to Salt Lake City. And so I set out to get a job with them. And it didn't happen immediately. It took some time and, worked, through several different, probably 8 or 10 rounds of interviews, that kind of thing. But eventually I landed my job with Goldman Sachs, and
What was that first job?
First job was trading international mutual funds. Oh. So fascinating, especially given the timing of the financial crisis. So that was all happening, and you could see money moving from money market funds into corporate-backed money market funds into treasury-backed money market funds. And, it was just really interesting to watch how investors, or how people reacted when the financial system as we knew it was completely morphing into something new. And it was a fascinating time. Been through several different positions there since then, and eventually landed in the role like Mark described before. But to get there, it was so. While it took some time to secure the job and all that, it also, the whole time that I've been working there, it's not like I can just get up and get out of bed and go to work. So it kind of requires a team. Like mostly it's been my mom that's helped me get dressed, get out of bed, into my wheelchair, get some food, and then get into the office. And so the family was there for me all of the way. It was, it's been an amazing family building experience. And so anyway, I just recently passed my 20-year anniversary with the firm, and for that whole time, the family was there for me all of the way. But and so anyway, that's kind of my story. And so for the last 20 years, it's been I've learned the importance of hard work um, and being around people and working and to find it gives me autonomy. It allows me to buy a condominium next to my parents so that they can help take care of me. It's just been a very I feel like I've had a lot of success. I've been able to I'm happy with where I've been in life, but it all happened because of a teamwork type experience where my family was willing to take care of me and I was willing to work hard, and everybody benefited from that relationship.
Yeah, it's an extraordinary act to just get to work, as you related it to me before. And it takes a team, but it also is extraordinary for you to get from point A to point B. Let me ask you just a couple of questions about that period of your life. First of all, the date. She stayed on the top. Did any injuries happen? I mean, she's still in an accident. It's still a freeway. Did anything happen to her?
No, a few bumps and bruises, but nobody else was seriously injured in the accident.
So she gets bumps and bruises, stays on the top. You go 35 feet, hit all sorts of things, including concrete at the bottom. Unbelievable. And that's how life is to some extent, It's just amazing.
But there again, if it hadn't been for her, I would have died, because when I landed on that shoulder of the freeway, I was in full cardiac arrest. The ambulance was saying that I wasn't going to make it. And she's like, no, I was talking to him a few minutes ago. You need to try and bring him back. And so they did. And then that was when the helicopter picked me up and took me to the hospital. But when I got to the hospital in the helicopter, because I lived, in the neighborhood right adjacent to the hospital, there were neighbors there. My parents were there, and the EMTs just basically told my parents, say your goodbyes. These people in these situations don't make it. They're gonna, he's not gonna make it tonight. And it really took a couple of days to kind of be stabilized enough to where they were confident that I was going to be able to live.
Yeah, unbelievable. Well, we're meeting today mostly because of your willingness, generosity to be vulnerable and talk about this the 1,000th time, but also because of our dogs. I said no for 27 years and was finally at the point where my second to last son talked me into it with a research paper and some interviewing and some serious effort. But then in the dark, walking around in the neighborhoods and up on a path in the mountains, we ran into each other again. It's our dogs that brought us together. That's fun.
Dogs are the best.
Dogs are the best. So you talked about team efforts. Let's transition. How does someone that's just using their mind not only get through complicated equations, but the challenges of organization life, which includes all those valuable and useless meetings and great relationships and tough political relationships and all sorts of things that all of us that have had jobs in a big organization or mid-sized organization have experienced. And here you are in this situation. How did you navigate upward and hit some milestones and get to a point where you're running something significant?
Yeah, no, I think back on what it must have been like for a person to have been in my situation 30 years before me. The reality of it now is that there's all kinds of tools and software available to help me stay organized, prioritized. And I think that the other thing that actually has become a strength of all this is to just simplify. It's so easy to think, okay, I got a million things to do, but it's also maybe not the most effective thing to think about. Just I gotta accomplish these 100 things and punch through your list of 100 items in a day. It might make more sense to prioritize, really get the 2 or 3 top things on top, and then let the other things go, as long as you're communicating about what those other things, what the status of those other things are. So I think that's a lot of it. It's just like learning to use the tools that are available, and being able to learn how each of us individually are most effective at tackling any given task throughout the day, or any list of tasks.
Yeah. Let me just tell you something. I discovered in our work. We discovered in our work that, and I know that the company organization has done research like this, and the research-based learning has talked to me about this, but we've also found in our work, if you focus on 2 initiatives, major initiatives, you have a pretty good chance of succeeding. You have maybe an 80+%. Focus on 1, it's even higher than 80. But if you focus to 3, you're really starting to bet. It gets to 50, 60% likelihood. If you get going with a lot of things and busyness like you're describing, and you do 4 to 20, even at 4, you're well below 50-50 chance. So now I'm betting against the person who does 4 to 20 things to focus on. What's interesting in our work is we discovered that that's also true within the major initiative. So you have this big organizational or divisional initiative, and the focus you're talking about is so powerful mathematically. But it's also true that the outcome that you're focused on within, if you say, okay, we're only going to do 1 initiative, but we want to accomplish these 5 subsets or these 20 subsets within the initiative, then the team is not directed and not precise, and they don't have a bullseye. They have a big, giant target, and they just are fine hitting the paper outside the rings. But if you have 1 or 2 specific things, maybe 3 if you want to get very brave, then you have a much, much better chance of succeeding on that particular initiative. So it's really a powerful thing you just said. Look, I can't do that much with everything that everyone else has that they take for granted, but I'm going to use the power and the potency of focus to get something done that's more important, maybe.
And the rule that I've kind of used, I don't remember where I heard it exactly, but is the importance of, like, I try and spend 2/3 of my day on the 3 things that are most important. Anything else outside of that, I can sort of manage, but the important part, or the rule I've kind of lived by, is so it's, I guess, one more kind of, although not necessarily, you can figure that if you're focusing on the 3 most important tasks, 2 of those might, I think kind of what I'm trying to say is that multitasking isn't possible. And so as long as you are, I think a lot of what is important in this space is focus. And so whether or not you're focused on solving a mathematical problem or solving another problem, as long as your focus is on that, and as long as you're spending the majority of your time solving the important problems, to me, that's what sort of leads to success, and also leads to the ability to finish a task and be a top performer.
You're saying not just the number, but the continuity of focus lets you have additional connections and develop ideas, whereas if you're going back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, those things don't develop, don't connect, and you don't end up with a great result. Yeah, fascinating. Okay, I interrupted you. So you've learned to focus. Anything else that was a general practice that helped you rise in the organization?
I think that I'm a pretty non-confrontational person, which sometimes you have to be, but as much as I can avoid it, I do. But I think also just like being willing to, like, I don't see my job so much, like, I'm not managing a huge number of people or anything like that. But what I do have is I have a lot of experience and a lot of time at the firm. So that gives me the opportunity to mentor a lot of new people that come in, which creates, more stickiness in the job. And it allows me to help, show these people what the culture of the firm is, and allows them to kind of like grow in the role. So I would say that, like, the main thing that I think differentiates me and has helped me to get ahead at the firm is my willingness to not only try and do what's best for me, but also try and do what's best for my colleagues and my team, and that sort of thing. I don't necessarily think of leadership as being how many people are under your or in your organization tree. I think of it much more as being ownership of a particular problem at the firm, and then bringing the right people in to help manage that problem.
Yeah, one of the things that was really interesting to me as we talked before deciding to do this is, or scheduling it, was that you have a few people that are underneath you. You also have many places, without getting into detail, you have many places to make sure the revenue goes from all those places to one right place. So you're directing traffic of computers as though they were people, so to speak, and you're directing people. And I mentioned to you, my admiration for the difference between someone like a Leonard Bernstein orchestra conductor who spends a lot of time beforehand and gets to the point where there was even one performance where he folded his arms, didn't wave the baton, and used his face to orchestrate everything. And it made me think of you. And he's won so many Emmys and Grammys and even an Academy Award or two, I think he's been nominated at least for. And there's other orchestra conductors that give you the sheet of music and expect you to follow the exact instructions of Bach or Beethoven. And by the way, because they manage all the sections, them. And it sounds like that wasn't going to work for you for obvious reasons, because you're not running around the whole organization. You're doing it all with your mind. And so you gave me a couple of interesting examples, but give me your thoughts first, and any example you'd like on how you orchestrated to the point where you're leading this information in the right place.
Sure. Yeah, I think that the main point out of or another key point of leadership is seeing the end from the beginning, the old Stephen Covey thing, where in your mind you see how you want a problem to be solved. That doesn't necessarily mean specifics. Going back to the Leonard Bernstein example, it means that you want to see the problem solved by bringing out the best of the entire orchestra, and then then understanding like the end from the beginning about where it's going to go, and kind of what the constraints are or boundaries are, and then letting everybody express or highlight their own individual skill in that context. So the one that I was talking to you about was the Grateful Dead. So they were my favorite band growing up, and I saw them clear up till when they stopped playing in '95. And the thing that I don't think I'd ever realized with watching them before, because it was all just spontaneous, and I loved how there were, how they would allow each member of the band to kind of give their own interpretation. Sometimes when playing a song, one person would kind of take charge of the music. The next time, a different person would. And what I realized after I kind of saw it is like the Music Never Stopped movie or something that came out in like 2017 or at Sundance or something. And what I realized there is how hard they worked to make it seem easy and to make it seem spontaneous. Like the spontaneity, was only a result of, or it would have never happened had there not been all of the hard work and practice that they put into understanding the guides and boundaries and where each song could kind of go and when it had gone off track and when to bring it back and all that sort of thing. So I think that that's true in many, many things that that when we work hard and practice at it, then it may go in places that we don't exactly expect, but usually those are positive surprises rather than negative surprises. And I think they're just the perfect example of they didn't show the average person how hard they worked, but then you see this movie and it's like they were practicing 18-20 hours a day, days on end, in order to get things right. And when you see that, you're like, wow, it was not nearly as they made it just seem like, oh, we're going to come out and kind of noodle around a little bit. Sometimes we get the words wrong, sometimes we don't, whatever. But the reality is they worked really hard to create that illusion of spontaneity, and it wasn't, you know, it was all very intentional. It wasn't like a mistake that they made it seem easy. They wanted it to seem easy. However, they also had to work really hard to get to that point.
I love that you bring up this example because I know nothing about the Grateful Dead. I do know that one of them passed away sadly today.
Yeah,
right?
just today.
Who was that?
The founding bass player. His name was Phil Lesh.
Phil Lesh. Well, that's sad. But you get close to your bands when you're young, and you care about them like they're friends. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, it's sad to think of it.
It's sad. But I'm fascinated because I don't know anything about them. And their brand to me is we party, we goof around all the time. We are just wild, crazy partiers with all sorts of drugs and alcohol and things like that. And you're saying maybe a little, but it was a brand that it was an experience that they were maybe projecting onto their ideal customers, the people that wanted to participate in that sort of stuff. And they're working 18 hours a day trying to get the minuscule things right. The other thing that you said is really fascinating is that you're saying, it sounds like, you know, put it in your words, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but it sounds like you're saying they practiced like crazy long hours with such minutia to create a structure, a framework, so that there is creativity and spontaneity at the concert, but it's within a bounds. It's a directed innovation rather than a crazy random creativity that it appears to be. Is that fair?
Yeah, that's exactly right. And that's what you know, I mean, my tastes have changed over time and things like that, but I'll never forget that that exact point, you know, just that they worked really hard to create a very spontaneous environment where they made everything look easy. And, you know, I don't know why they did that or what their purpose was. I think that they did genuinely have a good time when they were out trying to do this stuff. But the reality of it is that they worked really, really hard at it. And I don't think that there's many people that are successful in any endeavor, sports, music, business. Hard work is a part of that process of being successful or creating a product that you want, or, you know, it can be all kinds of things, but it's an important part that not too many people can achieve without focusing on that piece of hard work for.
And because of their success, and everyone, whether they listen to or not, knows who they are. It's interesting that you're also saying, I think, that not only are they diving in and for a season working really hard, but the continuity and the creating a cadence of accomplishment and a continuity over months, years, maybe 5-10 years at a time to really get things right in this structure. The irony of that sort of structure to create seeming chaos and creativity that works instead of just feels uncomfortable to people.
I think sometimes people just think something comes supernatural and you don't have to work at it. But to me, that's like that band is proof positive that it doesn't just happen. You know, it takes hard work at some level before it can be a success.
Yeah, you know, it sounds like I had another interview with one of the very first Swifties, and who was her friend, and I won't tell the whole story here. I'll let them listen to that later. But we just covered this, and she had a plan. Taylor Swift had a plan. It was not just natural gifts, and it was an extraordinary, complicated set of things to pull off. But she had an elegant, simple plan of cadence and going from one step to the next, and putting in all the hours to make that elegance happen so amazingly. And it just seemed like it was luck and everything else. It was not. It was surgical precision and planning and effort, like you're talking about.
Yeah, she's definitely got a mind of, you know, she's elevated the whole concert experience for everybody in the country and in the world. Anyway, she's amazing, and I'm not surprised to hear that story.
Yeah. You know, another thing, I'll go back to Bernstein for a second that I think you're saying, and I hear in your own leadership that I wanted to cover, is just to highlight the point where the weeks and the even the months before you launch a program in that realm is a lot like leadership in a business, in that you have big projects that are going to take a whole quarter or a whole year or two. People go on missions for 2 years to accomplish a product launch or something, and yet to start in the beginning of the plan, there are dictators that get pretty substandard results, and then there are orchestrators that go to each team, in this case a section, the violin section. They may go to the lead, but they ask the lead, hey, I want you to work with your team, pull out the most creative version of this music you can, where some of the dictatorial maestros are telling them, follow Bach, just do it that way. But they're requiring them to go back to the team, pull out more creativity from professionals that we trust, and I'll be back, and I'll be doing the same thing with every other section, and then we'll literally orchestrate it and literally harmonize it and march ahead, and we'll launch that program in a few months, and it will be the best in the nation or whatever. And all that work outside of the performance is so fascinating, because that's the kind of work you're talking about with the Grateful Dead and that you've accomplished in your career, it sounds like.
Well, and another example is I think that there's the Bernstein guy that's the orchestrator. That reminds me a little bit of Elon Musk too. He has, how many things does he have going on? SpaceX, great internet, and then he has Tesla, and then the internal, software that they're, I don't even know the names of the companies, but anyway, he has a whole swath of things going on. I myself work much better if I'm focused on one or two things. So I think that the point that comes out of that is understanding what your strengths are, understanding how you're most effective and able to get things done. And then, in Elon's case, it's a lot of things. In my case, it's a few things, but it is very, but by making that understanding, you can start working towards your strengths and making sure that you are focused and, making sure that you're efficient at how you're going about what you're doing. And it may not be the same for everybody.
Yeah. He may be a superhero, but there just literally aren't enough hours in the day to be a micromanager at the top of large organizations like SpaceX and X, et cetera, and then Tesla. And you just can't be the person that's literally micromanaging everything in each of those with all the divisions and everything. It's just an impossibility, which means he has to orchestrate.
Yeah, it does. And, micromanaging I don't think is ever a good thing, but I also think that failing to manage is never a good thing. People, when they're new in an organization, or if they're understanding a new process or whatever, they need direction, and you can't be afraid to give that direction. You have to be willing to do that just as much as you have to be willing to back off and not be a micromanager. So I think that's always a fine line of any manager, is figuring out which where you are in each process and with each person and their understanding and all that, and help them to succeed by giving them enough direction but not thwarting them with looking over the shoulder all the time.
Yeah. You and I have not talked at all about this. I'm just curious what your actions are here. So leaders and managers have meetings. There's big, long, painful, useless meetings we've all been part of that are really detrimental to productivity, I believe. There's small, timely little 15-minute huddles that I strongly believe in. And they focus on accomplishment of the week and what's going to happen this next week and the progress towards something bigger like a team objective. But those to orchestrate those team objectives, whether it's computers or people, what is your philosophy on meetings and a cadence and a frequency and who goes, and just any of your thoughts over your career that's now substantial about meetings and that sort of thing?
Yeah, I hate meetings so badly. Especially when they're just meetings because you're supposed to have a meeting. But I also feel like you're doing a real disservice to younger employees or people that are new, that kind of thing, if they don't have a clear direction of what they need to do and what's expected. And then, you need to follow up on it, make sure that they have a clear understanding and see if they're delivering the right product, what you expect. And so anyway, I don't like meetings at all either, but I do think that there are some cases where a meeting is an important part to set the right direction so that everybody knows where the team is going. But those meetings should be as short as possible, and as they just need to be clear. They can't be any kind of ambiguity about what's expected following the conversation or a meeting or whatever. It doesn't even have to be a meeting. It could be just like, talking to somebody at the desk or whatever.
Stand up, a conversation, some sort of. Yeah, I wanted to ask you, because of your leadership and your situation in life that showed up, and there's these moments in life, and I'll spare you mine. I want to hear yours, but they're not just mere interactions that you just mentioned at a desk. They're not just meetings. They're consequential. They could have been casual, but they mattered instead. And it was a choice of a leader, whether it was a teacher, a parent, a scout leader, or a business leader. I had plenty of business leaders that did this, where they made the interaction really matter in a bold way. And I call those bold encounters. That's why this is called what it is. It's because people interacting with people in the right way, with the right plan, can be really powerful. Have you had some examples in your life where someone stepped in for 5 seconds or 5 months and you mentioned your family, but others that you just really transformed your thinking, your direction, or your attitude or something?
Yeah, so I did have an experience that impacted me in that way that only was a couple minutes long, but it wasn't from like somebody that came and gave me positive advice or helped me understand something in a new way. Instead, I'd flown into Las Vegas airport. I was in a wheelchair, a push wheelchair, so I didn't have my power wheelchair with me. I was going to a party at my friend's house that night, and he was going to pick me up initially, but then he had gone into a surgery where he was a dentist, so he went into a surgery and said, "Hey, just grab a cab over to my house." And so anyway, I needed to get from like the passenger pickup of private pickup over to the taxi cab area. So to do that, what I did is I had to get somebody to push me from where I was over to the other side. So I looked around for a minute, and I need help fairly regularly. So I feel like usually I can tell the right people to ask and that sort of thing. And so I asked this guy, and he turned around and he said, "F you," and I was like, "Whoa!" And then the most amazing thing happened. There was all kinds of people that were around and saw this, and they would come up to me and, "Hey, can I help you? What do you need?" And so it was like that one person, like the point that I'm getting at is like ever since I've had this, been in this situation, I always get to see the best in people. Like it's very rarely that people put their worst foot forward. In this case, somebody put their worst foot forward initially, and what happens? 25 other people put their best foot forward and get me over to the other side. Another time flying from Salt Lake to California to get a new wheelchair, and there was a guy that was he was the head salesperson for Aston Martin in Orange County, and he was male model handsome and stuff like that. So I think, I'm just going to put these earbuds in myself when I'm struggling with it. And he's like, "Hey, let me get that for you." Turns out to be the nicest guy in the world. Told me his life story. He was moving from he'd been promised from the CEO of Aston Martin that he was in the succession line to become the next CEO of it. But he had instead decided to leave Orange County, quit his job, and buy part of a Chevy dealer in Oklahoma so that his family would know who he was. And he knew that if he would have stuck with Aston Martin, that he wouldn't know his kids, and that wasn't something that he was willing to sacrifice for a CEO job. So anyway, like all kinds of just interesting encounters with people that I've learned a ton. I would actually say if I was going to go back to a positive one, it was that one where he was moving his family back to Oklahoma, and he was just very open, outgoing. So I'm really lucky. I feel like that I always get to see the best in people. Like which is it kind of ties back to another important part of leadership to me, and that is just making sure that you treat everybody equal. Not like esteeming one person above another because they have more money or because they're more senior, or like I make friends with all of the homeless people on the tracks train sometimes, and I feel like a lot of our problems right now in the world would be solved if everybody just determined to esteem each other equally and to do right by their neighbor as if it were their brother or sister. And anyway, so I think that's another important part of leadership that is very much neglected. That should we amplify it, we would have many of our problems solved. And I think that at a micro level, or at an interaction level, it's what allows us to help each other succeed and be better at everything we do.
Yeah. Wow. Those are amazing thoughts and amazing stories. Basically having the chance to become the real James Bond boss, and then deciding I'm going to pick my family and make sure they know who I am by being a normal person in a Midwest environment. Wow.
And he said he'd already decided, like he'd already had in his mind, which I think is an important thing too. He saw the end before the beginning. He'd had in his mind the conversation that he was going to have with his daughters, who he knew would come up to them in the next 10 years and say, "Dad, why did you move us out of Orange County to live in Oklahoma?" And he had already determined that he was going to tell them that, if he hadn't moved them out of Orange County to Oklahoma, that they wouldn't be having this conversation with him right now, because they wouldn't know who he was, because he would be traveling so much. I thought that was amazing.
That's amazing vision, isn't it? A few years later, 5 years out, this is what I want in my personal life and my family's, more importantly. Mm-hmm. Wow, that's amazing. The other thing that's really, really inspiring that you said to me, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, I want to hear what you think about this, but this is a business podcast. It's lead anything, get unstuck, and create a better plan to do so. And these interactions give us these insights that are far beyond business and far beyond life even. And one of the many findings that had super high predictability to results, client results and financial results, was trustworthiness, genuineness, sincerity, a gravitas that isn't your own gravitas, but the importance of the plan. So the plan's the boss, not me or you and our opinions, and such character-related things. And there's another one about positivity, in the sense that not positivity like let's all be happy and fun all the time, but a positivity as in confidence and faith, and I believe in this thing that we do for our target market and how they benefit specifically, and I believe strongly that that's a good thing in life, whatever it is for your company. But their focus is on making that life, that job, that family conversation at the end of the day better, and their customers too better, and that they really believe in that is important because it's part of life. And that is a belief. We don't like to say belief and faith like that other guy with his vision, and we don't like to say those in work life too much, and it's too bad, I think, because they predict success for sure. And so you've mentioned to me at a personal moment, not even related to this, you talked to me about how you had a little faith turnaround to look for the good and look for the future when you were looking for the fun and the now and the me right before your accident. You mind sharing with us a little bit about some of your thoughts on that?
So yeah, I think, and it's not tying back to that specific experience. I mean, that's just kind of my life story. But when I look at my life now and what I've learned, I feel like one of the most important things is to prioritize the most important things first, which may have nothing to do with work. But if you prioritize those things and give that, that sort of like spiritual opportunity of spiritual growth opportunity, then, if you've got like 15, 20 minutes to start it all out, then what happens is your mind expands and you're able to solve problems almost it's like it almost rewires your brain in a way where you can solve a problem using, because your mind is expanded beyond what it would have had you not sort of focused on a spiritual thing. So Anyway, I believe a lot in the importance of spirituality, and letting and getting that in first thing, or as early as possible, so that when new problems present themselves, those kind of neurons around your brain have opened up, and you're seeing solutions that you may otherwise not have seen. And I had there's one other experience I had that really taught me a lot about this. It was like I was 16, 17 years old. I was learning how to telemark ski, and I went up to snowbird one day, and as I came down the mountain, I don't think I made one turn. It was the most miserable spirit experience I can almost remember skiing. Like I just crashed all day, didn't make a turn, got to the bottom. But then and after doing that for 8 or 9 hours, I I'd been given my friend's dad had given me a book called The Inner Game of Tennis, and it kind of talked about how how he found that he was able to coach his players to be better players when they would go out on the court, just by saying, "Oh, don't worry about your grip. Just imagine yourself hitting a nice ball into the far right corner," and then the body automatically kind of knew how to grip. So with like if he would tell them grab the grip at the 3 o'clock and tell them to do that and then hit it in the back corner, it was a poor result. But if he said, "Look, you've put it into the back corner and do it," then he could get a positive result. So the point being is that through the process of visualization and the player wanting to be, hit the ball in the right spot in the right way and not getting into any, he found that the results were way better. And so what I did that summer is I'd spend 30 minutes each night, and I was very rigorous about doing it. I'd spend 30 minutes each night just visualizing, imagining myself being able to telemark and being able to telemark well. So I go from doing that from, March till October, November, and I go up and I try and telemark ski. And I go to the very top, I just go to the top of the tram, I figure I'm going to go down and see how this works. And I came down and I could do it. And I could do it well. And it was like, it blew my mind, the role that doing it first in your mind and then in, physically, that makes that's how you get to a successful spot quickly. If you just go out and, you have to be able to do it successfully through repetition, or else you're not gonna be able to do it. And that involves just going to your mind for repetition, and then your body will eventually come along. So anyway, I think that the visualization and the concentrating sometimes on not what you're looking at, or what your biggest problem is, and then somehow or another your body figures out a way, or your mind comes up with a solution that you hadn't thought of. That's a great solution to the problem, and I think that that's really important to remember, that piece of problem solving.
Wow. Those are great stories. It makes me think of a couple of things too, like the inner life of tennis. You better know your destination. And then the second thing that I think you're saying is that if you know your destination for something, then your own, your ancient body, so to speak, after all the years that humans have been alive and developing this mortal capability, will figure out so much below your consciousness that you just don't realize. And if you just know what you're supposed to do, it will figure it out, you're saying. But then, so that's kind of like going deeper into yourself and your ancient self and relying on it and giving it the purpose or the destination and letting it do its thing. But you also started out with, look, I use my mind as my tool primarily, and I need more. And so I rise to a larger consciousness outside of my consciousness, and I get more out of consciousness by going to a bigger consciousness than myself.
Yeah, it's so true.
Yeah. Wow. Powerful, powerful stuff. Before I let you go and ask you a couple more questions to finish, what other things as far as leading anything or leading people in the workplace, or even leading data, to the right places, what is anything else that you would like to talk about that is really important in leading people or process or whatever you need to?
Yeah, I think that like I said, my main leadership principles or the ideals that I try and live by are, like I said, taking ownership of the problem, um, developing an opinion on it. So you have to, sometimes you have to, if you're around, if there's a decision being made in a room and several people are saying, oh, we ought to do this, or a leader even is just saying, oh, we ought to do this, but yet, and nobody will, but if you have a dissenting idea, but you don't speak up, it doesn't do any good in the problem solving process. However, if you have somebody that's expressed an opinion and you've thought about it and made have a different solution than what's being proposed, it's your responsibility also to step up and say what that alternative solution is. You can't just sit back and say, oh, well, the person's more senior or whatever, it's, so I think that, the ownership piece, and I think everybody in a room can take ownership of the same problem, but it's important to take that ownership, think through it, as far as you can, as far as the best way to go about it. And that's everybody's responsibility. And then it's everybody's responsibility also to make sure that that they voice that concern. That's how good ideas develop, and how, if you want to have a lot of different input or different perspectives on a problem, if you don't speak your mind, you're also not going to get any benefit out of having a diverse room. And I think that, and I'm talking about diversity of thought mostly, where if you have diversity of thought and people speak up, I think that's a really critical element of a good, of healthy problem solving, and you have to be willing to state that. So you own it, you come up with your own idea of what the end looks like from the beginning, and then you share that, and then through that process good decisions happen. And so that's why I kind of say that I don't think leadership has to do with how many people are in your organization. It has to do with being one of those owners of any problem.
Inviting people in and letting them collaborate and informally join you on a team and get things done. But I think what you're saying is a very subtle thing in an organization, even a mid-sized organization, where you do see junior people knowing that they're lower in title, and so they assume that if they disagree with the 5 executives or even a board member in a particular meeting, and it's very rare that they get to be in, and all of a sudden they find themselves there. And I've had a couple of such instances where I did cower, but in the decades that followed, I've learned what you just said. It's very important not to be really excited about your idea or want to be right or smart, but recognizing, given the purpose and the path that we're all trying to travel down together, that you see something that has not been mentioned or maybe even countered, and you have to stand up for something. And when you stand up for something, you can count on the blowback, you can count on the challenge ahead. And that's not because you did the wrong thing. That's part of life's process. I'm sitting quietly in the meeting. I hear the executive saying the wrong thing. I see something, and I've seen it firsthand, that's the right thing. I have to stand up, raise my hand and say, not literally stand up, but raise your hand and say, hey, this is how we see it. This is how the client wants it, and they benefit from it. Here's the stance I'm taking because I've witnessed it so much. And I want us all to end up at the not the wrong destination. And then you can expect that next moment to be hard. And that's okay. It could be a reprimand. It could be a firing. It could just be an embarrassing moment. I just witnessed one of those in a client meeting. A very embarrassing moment. It's okay. You're saying what you see, and you're speaking the truth, and you're going to get a challenge at the end. And that's part of life and learning.
Absolutely. But I also think that a good leader is not going to be demeaning in any kind of response. a good
but they're rare.
A good leader is going to say, all right, we're trying to solve a problem. Here is one idea. Now this new analyst expressed another idea. And so, understand, anybody that doesn't understand that a new analyst can have a great idea is missing out on the entire benefit of having an analyst, you know? And so you take the senior leader, the analyst, nobody should get up in arms or feel embarrassed about their idea, but you should discuss them. What are the merits of this one? What are the merits of this one? And by esteeming everybody equal, I know that's a little bit, there's a few problems with that in a workplace environment, but by and large, you can, by esteeming everybody as being equal, you're going to create that set of ideas that takes into account the younger person's perspective, the senior executive's perspective, and that free flow of ideas should be encouraged, not discouraged.
Yeah. After all, the whole reason that we all ended up with jobs in that organization, in that hypothetical or your own organization, is for a real reason, which is there's a particular set of people in society that happen to need what we do, and that we have developed a specific capability or capabilities in a limited set to do, and that's why we exist. That's why we have a business license. That's why we employ people. That's why there's investment, because people have a confidence that we can do that directional set of things. And if a lower level employee can improve on that and make it the job and the life and the customers of the client better, then they should be heard. And I love what you're saying, because there's this subtle thing where, well, if I don't say anything, nothing will happen. And that's exactly right. It won't cost us anything. Well, that's exactly right in a technical way. But there's this opportunity cost because you didn't say anything. Like, the whole thing is invisible if you just stand still, which is the tragedy, because no one will ever notice, because it's not what we literally lost, but it's something we failed to gain that could have been enormous. And all it would have cost you is a little discomfort and challenge from the blowback.
I think you're right. The last thing I'd say too on that is the senior executive, if he's not willing to accept feedback from the junior person, then he shouldn't have invited him or her into the meeting. I mean, it's like,
even a routine meeting.
Yeah,
just get rid of them and let them go work.
Yeah. There's no reason why a person should be in a meeting where they are vulnerable to being chastised because of an idea.
Or muzzled, impolitely, barely, Yeah. Well, I got to ask you a couple other things, and then I'll let you go. One thing I'm really curious about that I really could learn something. I don't see an angle on this, because I've worked in financial areas a bit, but not deeply my whole career. And so every other industry I ever work in, the clients, the ideal client, where we get our soul, what we really should be best at, is our purpose, and the most specific, deepest part of the purpose. It's not saving the planet or making people money. It's, we were designed to help that person. If we can't help them in a specific, profound ways, then who are we? However, clients are different in your industry. Like, is the client carry that sort of weight in your industry, where we're talking about a lot of interest, earnings and things like that are not making a job more effective or a life better or exciting or whatever?
Yeah.
What is the place of the client in the financial industry?
Well, I mean, we're there. I don't do a ton of direct client interaction, but I do know from the culture of the firm and from everything, we are there to solve problems that the client can't solve on their own. Why would they not? Why would they hire us if they could just do this on their own? So, it involves, like, I think anytime you're interacting with a client or even if it's an internal client or a person that is, just anybody we meet in any interaction, it's important to just to serve them. I mean, I think of it a lot in that terms, like, what can I do to add value to this relationship? And if you're not adding value, you're not really doing anything. So I think that is the most important thing when it comes to our clients, is just making sure that we're coming up with unique solutions to their problems that help them make money.
Yeah.
As long as it's legally and regulatorily kosher.
Well, last thing that's more on technical nature, and we'll sign off with one other. But you're in technology, and if you had to think of some of your best, there's a lot to cover in innovation, but if you were just strictly talking about coming up with ideas to solve a problem, let's talk about ideation, which is kind of synonymous with creativity or innovation generally. Like, you're an expert in this area. What are your ideas to come up with solving problems and coming up with ideas to create new opportunities?
So I have a better example than just a technology solution.
Okay.
So, I mentioned that my family had, the main theme coming out of it was that family was there for me all the way.
Yeah.
And they have been. Yeah. But my parents are also going to both be turning 90 years old in the next 18 months. And I know that they won't be able to take care of me forever. I have a brother that would take me in, but he has a young family. I don't necessarily want to have to put that burden on him, although I know I'll spend a ton of time with them and do all that kind of thing. But about a year ago, I started looking around to see what options were available to me for housing. Where can I get somebody that will help me get dressed, get up and out of bed, into a wheelchair, fed, and out the door to work? Because, that's an important part of my life is work. And so about a year ago, I started looking around. I found, there's my brother's option, which is, a great one. I also looked into assisted living homes. They're not an option because I need lifting out of bed into the wheelchair, and that doesn't work. So that option's off the table. So you look at nursing homes. Demographic, I definitely don't feel a part of. The costs are $16,000, $17,000 a month.
You're going the other direction. You're going up. We're not backward.
And it's very possible that after living there a while, you can't afford to pay the rent because they increase their charges or whatever. And that's really the only place where you can get assisted or get help getting lifted in and out of bed and going to work and that kind of thing. But that's not. Realistically, that's not even an option. Or else, at some point you'll have to quit and take on, and quit your job so that you qualify for government assistance, sort of thing. So anyway, I worked with my firm to see if there was something that could be done, if there was a new type of building that could be built using community reinvestment funds, or just to see if there was some sort of solution that we could identify with that. And I had a meeting and with the senior person in Salt Lake and some people from New York to see what was available. And so to figure out how many people would be impacted, I was tasked with reaching out to the University of Utah to see what how many people could benefit from this. Turns out that they had seen this problem many years ago and had a concept called the 1U Center, where it would be like on the top floor, like doctors, pre-med, pre-nursing, pre-occupational therapy. Next level down would be patients with complex disabilities that could be their short-term, long-term, lifetime sort of thing. Wide open floor plan, beautiful, beautiful living experience. And then on the bottom floor, they would have robots and robotic companies come in that would be learning how to be nursing robots and that kind of thing, help with lifting and all that kind of stuff. An adaptive ski program, adaptive sports, all this sort of thing. So it was like, wow, this is like a perfect solution. You have a solution, you have you have a problem that needs to be solved with giving, pre-med people some real world experience so that they can decide if they've really made the career choice that they want. You have new patients that are coming in there that just have had a complex disability. And then, potentially you could have a person like me living there and I could help encourage some of those people that are just going through the start of the process to, have some hope and, some idea of how they can work in the future. And also it would allow me to live there so that I wouldn't have to quit working and I could have a job that would, and then just pay the rent of some sort. So to me, I like that's been the most interesting solution to a problem that I've seen come together, just because all of the constituents, like four different constituencies benefit from a single solution. And anyway, I love that example of how, when
killing four birds with one stone.
How often does that happen? It's very rare. So
wow, it's like you in the beginning did a little research, which anyone would maybe do, but then you said, no, I'm gonna get outside my inner circle, my family and my thoughts. I'm gonna talk to my outer circles, some strangers. And then you got very aggressive about it and got it done in kind of a bold outreach, and really just got the right minds, and you found multiple minds in multiple places.
And we're definitely not done yet, but this is a problem that exists everywhere in this entire country. And what the university had come up with is a solution that would work anywhere there's a medical school in the entire country. And so anyway, it's just kind of cool to think that right here in Utah, there's a solution to a problem that exists everywhere across the country. And that solution is so empowering and enabling for people with disabilities.
It's terrific. Calvin Wooley, thank you so much. Absolutely. Such a great set of ideas.
Thanks, Mark.
Thank you for joining us to get leaders unstuck and thriving with their teams. You've heard a little bit about the power of bold encounters and leadership. Watch on. Go to full episodes with the iconic expert interviews at markspencercook.com/podcast. And please subscribe. My site takes you directly to YouTube video and podcast versions. Please make comments. Share this with your friends. Also, reach out to us to just brainstorm your priorities, challenges, events, or how bold encounters might help. Visit windfallpartners.com. Click the Let's Talk button without obligation and reach out. I look forward to speaking. Thank you for joining us. Now, let's lead with bold encounters today.